Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is episode 5 of Jeremy Alvarez TV. And today, my special guest today is a dear old friend who was actually one of my first athletes when I first became a certified athletic trainer in Fresno, California. And welcome, Coach Eli.
Hey, guys. Jeremy, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
So Coach Eli is going to talk a little bit about where he works and what he does. But just real quick, he is the head men's varsity coach at Central East High School for Central Unified School District in Fresno, California currently. So Coach Eli, we've known each other for a while, and then we reconnected after, me working with you and showing you a lot of stuff. And then when we reconnected, you had a true found love for working with kids as well. And then that's when we're like, okay, we're going to be lifelong friends.
Heck yeah, man. It's been, like reconnecting. Obviously, the age that we met, I feel like we were both at that eager age of like finishing up our undergrad and getting things going, getting like so many just ideas. And I think when we first met, I was in the recovery process of trying to just take care of my body and like really not like at the time, I didn't know it was like preventative stuff, but it was like stuff that really helped me not only have successful seasons there at Fresno Pacific, but also like getting into coaching and getting into teaching. There's just so much stuff that just, I cherished that we had those conversations. And honestly, you're a great resource to use and to kind of bounce conversations off of. And then at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, well, by the way, like, how are you doing? Like, we haven't talked in so long. And so it's awesome to catch up. And even if we don't get to see each other in person, it's still an awesome to connect through Zoom and through your podcast and stuff, and just stay in touch that way, man.
Man, when we first met, it's crazy to think it's almost 10 years ago.
Right.
And you were one of my, I wouldn't say few, like in the beginning, you were one of the few for sure that sort of drank the Kool-Aid on what I was doing. Cause I brought a whole different holistic approach to where we were at, and nobody else was thinking that or even doing that. And you listened, and I saw that, or I didn't just see, I experienced you coming in often and doing what I said. I'm like, whoa, wow, he's actually doing what I'm saying. Yeah. And that's very admirable, because that shows, and I knew that we were going to be close because of just your personality of having an open mind. All right. I think that's the biggest thing. And the last thing I'll say before I pass it back to you to give us a little background on you is that, man, this goes to show, like I always talk about, perception is powerful. If you don't actually perceive and feel this or anything, then it's really hard. It'll never like catch your attention and stick with you if you don't actually feel it and go through it. And your coaching, I think you're about to talk about now, you carried on a lot of that, and your excitement to want to learn more after what you felt, and then you felt carry on onto the soccer field. It's pretty cool. So what I want you to do next. Okay, go ahead.
I think, and just to kind of add on to that, and we can kind of segue into kind of where I came from and like how I'm where I am today as well. But I think that the important thing is that like the buy-in, like I wish that there was more buy-in and more like risk taking in, your area of expertise, to be honest. Cause it's like, the phrase that you said, like drinking the Kool-Aid, like, yeah, it's a huge step. And it's like, sometimes I remember sitting there like, that was 2013. So I was trying to remember how old I was around that time, but I remember doing these like awkward stretches and like, no, you got to keep your eye following your hand and things like that. And I was like, man, like at times, you question it, but at the same time, it's like, that's where like, you just kind of like, you not only trust the process, but also kind of, you got to buy into it. And, I remember, the way that you would coach me and the way that you would, explain things. I remember trying to do that to like some of the younger kids when I started coaching, like, hey, let's do some hip flexor routines. So that way, when we do shooting, like a lot of shooting today, that repetitive motion, that repetitive movement isn't as like taxing, and you can kind of start to strengthen, and like your memory, your brain's incorporated in that movement, all that stuff. It's like, and then I just remember like sitting back and like, wow, I kind of explained that pretty well for not having like a huge physical therapy background,
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, it's been like, I wish I had like a tally for like all those times that's happened. I'm like, man, yeah, I think Jeremy taught me that one. Yeah. Oh yeah, maybe, that was something else that Jeremy kind of, wove into me. But yeah, so like coaching,
Yeah, share with us your coaching, your philosophy, your formula. Like, what's your strategy as a coach? How has it developed over the years? Where are you at right now with all that?
So and the sport we're talking about is soccer. I'm not sure if we made that clear in the beginning or not, but soccer was my number one sport, and it's kind of what I decided to go with. But we've talked about this multiple times. A lot of the reasons why I had success in soccer was because of all the other sports, all the other sports and all the other activities that I did that helped me with balance and with working with teammates and stuff. So I came from a pretty athletic background. My parents were both soccer players, but they also encouraged me to play other sports and like didn't limit me to only playing one sport. And so when I decided to play soccer collegiately, I took 2 years to play at Fresno City College, where I learned a lot, developed. I actually did a gap year, what's called now a gap year. I didn't know it was a gap year at the time, but I just took a year because of my age, I was able to still play one more year of club. And so out of high school, I played one more year of club and then played 2 years of junior college. So that process there, and like at the time, I didn't know I was going to go into coaching and I was going to go into teaching, which is what I went to Fresno Pacific for, to teach, believe it or not, elementary school. I have a liberal studies degree with a minor in biology. Yeah, with a minor in biology. So I decided, kind of last minute when I was offered a coaching opportunity that, hey, maybe I should stay with the high school level so that way I can coach. And so I think all of that, like tornado and kind of flurry of like, hey, like being exposed to this and just really finding the passion for teaching, learning, like continually learning, being professional with that and continuing to grow and learn in the things that I love doing. So like reading and developing and reaching out and finding resources. I in my credential program, there's a lot of classes that you take where, you're finding and building this list of resources and what's going to work for you and stuff. So, I'm losing my train of thought here. So,
yeah,
coaching.
So is that your strategy when you're coaching your youth athletes? You're trying to encourage them to play other sports like your background was. You're trying to encourage them to, develop just like yourself that you learned, right? You're trying to teach them a lot of things that the good things that you had when you were developing and some of the things that you learn along the way that, oh man, this is really important to do early on, like reading.
Yeah.
So,
no, for sure.
Yeah, I know. Like, I think I think I remember, but I know me for sure. Like, I totally underestimated the power of reading and all that until honestly the past couple of years, So, or I guess when I first met you, so almost 10 years ago,
Yeah.
I that's when I realized, whoa, reading is amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, so, kind of going back to that too, like my mom was a teacher, an elementary school teacher. And so both of my brothers were like, loved Harry Potter. They like had the discipline to like sit down and read, where like for me, I I still don't have like the discipline that I wish I had to sit down and read something. And I have a lot more of that now, just because I'm like, man, like this is a really interesting article. Or like when I'm teaching science, I teach biology, you know, we're doing case studies. And so I was explaining this to somebody else. I was asking kind of like, what's your coaching philosophy? You know, what do you emphasize? What do you kind of incorporate in your, you know, overall coaching? I say coaching, but also my teaching, because they're like simultaneous, right?
Yes.
So if you're coaching something, you're just teaching either a sport or, you know, there's academic coaches, there's tons of different variations, and they're just there to teach.
Yes.
So you can see my background. I love John Wooden because one of my second favorite sports, basketball, was not only a phenomenal player, but also an amazing coach and mentor. And, you know, in my opinion, there hasn't really been another coach that's done and had the success that he has had with, you know, an impact. You think impact, right? He's still, you know, has players that are now coaches, and like now those players have kids that, you know, are still like under his philosophy. And so I think, yeah, with like upbringing, you know, that's an important part. The way I explained it is, so with my biology background and science background, I really encourage like experimentation. I know it kind of sounds cheesy, but like, hey, like, what do you have to lose? You know, try something different. And I think that's where you and I are kind of on the same like brainwave. Like, hey, like, you've been kicking the ball with your right foot the whole practice. Why don't you try with your left? Or, you know, just simple things like that. And it's like, you know, those are I see those as like experiments, or I see those as like trial and error. And like in my biology classroom, I say like, all right, we're going to do a case study. Kids are like, yawn, you know, or like, you know, if you look at it from their perspective, like, all right, we're going to learn about DNA. Kids are like, yawn, right? So how can I make it like exciting? How can I grip them and get them kind of thinking about it? So instead of saying, hey, we're going to learn about DNA, I'll say, hey, we're going to talk about CRISPR and gene editing, and like why this random fish is, how we can like manipulate genes and things like that. And what are the benefits, you know, and then that's where that more like authentic learning and inquiry, that's another like big teaching tool for me. I think that like asking questions and like letting like players and students and letting them kind of explore. And then what's nice is, you know, with the college level, because I also coach at Fresno Pacific College, like that's like the cream of the crop, right? So they already have, some of them have that discipline to kind of pick it up, or like when we stop and play and ask them a question, like, hey, like, what were you thinking here? When we're watching film, like, you know, giving them questions, you know, and then once they have answers and they can kind of pick it out on their own, okay, now you ask the questions. Like, this is your guys' team, you know? So like flip-flopping it and kind of adjusting there. So, I mean, I would say I incorporate science, like theology, and science, like experimentation, like within my coaching philosophy, through like asking questions, experimentation.
That's great. So you get down to their level, find a way to explain the information to them in a way that they would understand, like CRISPR, something cool that they know they're like familiar with, right? Yeah.
You talked about, you know, I know one of the last podcasts you talked about like how you've had this like really like appreciation, or like newfound like appreciation for not astrology, but physics, right? Was it physics? So it's just like, you know, when we're not given like a exciting way to understand something, or when we're not asking questions, I can almost guarantee like why you got into physics was because you were asking questions like, what is up there? You know, like, why does this move this way? You know, and it's all inquiry. So, and that kind of falls back to my teaching education, which there's tons of classes that you have to take on, you know, what is the best way to learn, and, you know, what helps students like stay engaged and stuff. And so I would also say that I incorporate a lot of what I learned in my credential program and what I've learned through teaching. Like, there's always like classic example, right? So you have a season or you have something like a league to prepare for, right? So there's a preparation process. There's a some sort of assessment, right? And then there's an evaluation. So within that evaluation, you hopefully can make some type of adjustments, and then you kind of reassess, or you have like another game, and then you just kind of continue that process, right? So it's like preparation, assessment, evaluation and adjustment, and then reassess. So the way that I explain that to like soccer players is like, okay, what's the preparation? Practice, right? So we spend a lot of our time doing. What's the assessment? Scrimmage, maybe a game. What's the evaluation process? Well, that's something where like I want to grow. Like, how are we like, obviously at the high school and the varsity level, we're able to watch film, but at the youth age, they don't have access to things. So that's an area where it's kind of like, all right, how can I help with this evaluation process and making adjustments, right? And then the other part is the reflection and the reassessment. So like the next time you go out and play, like, are you making those same mistakes, or like what's happening, So I incorporate that, I would say, within my coaching as well,
so
which is pretty.
I think that's awesome. So like during the evaluation as a soccer coach, you are evaluating their decision making on the field. You're evaluating, a lot of that stuff that you go over on film, right?
Oh yeah.
For the game, related to the game. If you're noticing that a player is just like getting beat left every freaking time, like if the opponent goes, right, like they're with them, handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Left, beat. And then you're like, okay, well, when we go to practice, when we go to prepare, then I know we're going to work on, right? So then you go out there and you work on some drills, and you're going at them, their weakness or whatever, right? Now, I'm going to tie myself into this now.
Yeah.
So when do you make a decision that, holy crap, this person physically cannot do this? Like, they cannot turn their hips that way. They cannot, they just lose their control going that way. They're amazing, elite going that way, but they're like high school level going this way. So from what my role on the team is to see that stuff, because I'm also evaluating, but I'm evaluating something different.
A whole different, which is like super crucial. It's very important, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, I think obviously we could go off of different branches of our conversation, but like the communication between athletic trainer and coaches is huge, right? It's such like, there should be almost like a constant line of like communication. And so
earlier you were saying that, you were like, in my opinion, I think your field needs to, would you say have an open mind, or, not be scared to venture out, right?
Take risk, experiment. I mean, obviously science teacher background, you have labs, you have experiments. We did a lot of case studies, like, those are all real life experiences that you learn from, right? You learn from, you retain the information, the retaining part, and that like, can you write about it? Can you talk about it off the top of your head? And like, that's how I know you understand it. That's how I know you've learned. And then we can go on to something else, So
in my field, when you're an athlete trainer, you're looking up job description, let's say for a college soccer team, like what you're working with, or a high school soccer team. One of the bullet points on there is, injury prevention. And injury prevention, like you said, in my field is often, okay, that means like I'm going to implement a really good stretching program, or a really good dynamic warm-up program that can help prevent injuries and stuff like that, which is fine. I'm for that. Sure. But like you said, inquiry, right? Like, so if you ask further and you look more into like what that is, in my opinion, us athlete trainers, what it really means is looking at an example of what I just told you, evaluating during practice and during games, paying attention to the game, that this kid is getting beat right every time. And it's my responsibility to talk to the coach. Yeah, of course, for performance, I want to win too. We're helping the team.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
But if I don't do something with this and the coach keeps yelling at the kid, you got to go right 100 times every practice, right? But, they physically cannot, right? Their joint capsule won't let them, or, their muscle just won't let them, right? They're missing something, and they're trying, they really want to coach, but they can't, right? What's going to happen is an overuse injury or some other type of injury.
Yep.
And then they're going to be out longer. Now the coach is even more frustrated because this person can't even train because they're unhealthy. And so it's my job for injury prevention to look at people's asymmetries and weaknesses like this based off their previous injuries or their asymmetries. And then from there, talk to you, coach, and say, hey, coach, look, obviously I want you to win. I can help you get this kid to move right better. And then once he does that, you can scream at him and practice and train him and really drill him on the field. But it's unfair to the athlete to make them do 100 reps on their bad side if
because they got beat that side. It's like the simple, simple solution, right?
Yeah, they're not physically ready for it. And so in my field, like, how you were talking about their steps, like practice, train, evaluate, and the whole cycle, right? So in my field, scaffolding, there you go.
That's another education. I think I took a class on scaffolding. Like, everyone uses scaffolding, business, physical education. It's all like progressive and leading up to something, right? It's not like you can just throw something at a kid and hope that they get it and hope that it's. So one thing that came to mind is those simple Band-Aid solutions that we think like, oh yeah, like just do this and it'll fix everything, and it's like, the phrase the thing that comes to mind is like, you're literally just putting a Band-Aid on cancer. Like, I know in one of your previous podcasts, you were talking about the basketball player that has the ankle problem or whatever it is. And it's like, they go in to see you and it's like, okay, let's do some balance stuff on the little square ball and like a little square thing. And you can do this. And oh wait, now they're cleared. Okay, you're good. Now that injury won't happen anymore, And, the big question, which comes back to inquiry, right, is it game-like? Are we actually preparing them for something that they're going to experience during their competition or during their practice multiple times? And, you can get into statistics as well. Like how many times are they, turning in, or how many times is their knee, collapsing in? Is it something that it's 7 out of 10 times where, that injury is there's 30% chance that could happen, I think that there's, a huge, I think what it comes down to is there's a little bit of a disconnect between coaches and your guys' field, and,
even within our own field, the crazy part is like, there's research out there that's telling us the scenario that I keep using with you, that kid getting beat right. There's research telling us that what we've been doing, which is let the coach keep training him to go right. And then he gets hurt. Then he comes to the athletic trainer. We treat him. We don't do the stuff that you just mentioned, right? Like create a realistic environment, challenge the whole sensory motor system, make it game-like realistic, right? And then we end up just, using some really cool tape job I learned, right? Oh, we're using this like cool technique that I learned to like treat inflammation. And it's like, I'm all for that too. I'm not against that by any means. I love those things too. Tape and all that. But oh my God, like you're using it inappropriately, right? There should be, those should be to reinforce the pattern that we're trying to reteach.
Because, you have to consider, I mean, you probably see it too. And I think that we're on the same page where it's like, okay, this is a good temporary fix, but next season, or even like if they're a senior, and they, for me, I had bad knees. So it's like, if I didn't learn how to properly run, when we worked together and started to really train myself, I would still be running the same way and still be experiencing that pain or experiencing, the bad running mechanics or, those type of things. So it's like, although it's not like it's easy. I mean, obviously what we're talking about is not easy. It's not easy to train your body to do something. And if you guys don't whoever's listening to this, if you guys don't believe us, try walking backwards, or try, if you're a right-handed shooter, try shooting left-handed. That's essentially what we're talking about here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I think that it's very, it's your area of expertise, man, because you obviously have a lot more time, with working with different sports, with different injuries, and seeing those things. And what's cool is, you see those things, something works, or maybe you have a player that buys into it, and you can see the results, right? So it's, in my science nerdy background, it's like you're running these experiments, right? These trial and errors. It's like, that kind of worked, but is there something that I can do to expedite this so that way they can play in that championship game? Or is there something that I can do so that way it's a long-term solution and not just a really short-term ankle brace or knee brace type thing, right?
Yes.
So.
I have two points to make real quick, and the second one's going to segue us into what I want to talk about next.
Perfect.
So first one, just like you're saying, experimenting in science, and you mentioned earlier, like we're doing case studies, we're doing these things in measure, right? And
dude, we're just nerds, man.
We're just nerds, right? And science is exactly that. Like, you test it, you retest it, you test it, you retest it. Otherwise, you're just shooting at the hip. You don't even know what worked or not. And oftentimes that's what's happening. Oh, it kills me, man. It's like, oh, okay, like I see a weak glute, I'm just going to give him this exercise.
Yeah.
Did you even see if that particular, first of all, there's a million movements and exercises or different ways to get the glute to fire. So do you think the one that you chose helped this particular person? Everybody has their own neurological makeup, their own development that they came up in. And one exercise is not going to help achieve the same goal for every single person.
Classic cookie cutter, like, analogy, like everyone's going to one hat fits all type thing. It's
you got to retest. And in the very beginning of this podcast, we talked about how important perception is to feel it, right? So if a person's feeling pain, you do an activity with them and you never ask them to what's the word I'm looking for? To re-aggravate the pain, to re-demonstrate what movement causes the pain, right? If you have them do that right then and there, and they look at you with big eyes like, I have no more pain, it went away, their perception has changed immediately, right?
Wow.
So now you've already created buy-in.
I never thought of it that way, but that's like.
So now you've created what you were saying in the very beginning of this podcast, which is buy-in. But if you're just like, oh, Eli, like I discovered you have weak glutes. I'm just saying what I hear every athlete trainer say. You discovered you have weak glutes, so we're gonna go ahead and do some glute bridges, right? Okay,
squats or something.
Glute bridges, squats with bands around your knees. Monster walks, whatever else stuff. And
when do you play soccer, or when do you do a sport with bands around your knees?
Well, and you talked about trust, right? You talked about like, I can't believe I trusted you and stuff. Well, guess what I was doing that I'm just telling you now, 10 years later, is that
I was your lab rat.
you were, man. You would say, man, every time I plant with this foot and swing of this leg, it hurts. Like, okay, let's do a glute bridge. Not against glute bridges or monster walks or any of those things. Let's do a glute bridge, Eli. All right, cool. Do a glute bridge. All right, do it. Plant the foot swing. Still kind of hurts. Okay, cool. Guess what? I'm not doing glute bridges with you. That didn't work for your neurology, for your brain. Next exercise.
Like you can like check it off and like move on to something else, or like, I
science,
totally
man.
understand
It's a ton of mini experiments, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're changing your perception. Finally, we do the thing that you're like, it doesn't hurt anymore. This is weird, right? And you're like, I'm going to Jeremy every time because he fixed me in one visit, blah, whatever, right? And
maybe that's why I bought in.
Yeah, maybe. But, that's pretty much it right there. That has to happen. Right. And we're not doing that. So the second thing I wanted to talk about is you talked about how it's, you were asking the audience, like, if you don't believe me, try walking backwards and, closing your eyes and balancing and like,
Dude, yeah, those type of things. But like, to me, obviously inquiry, right? I talked about that earlier, but like, if I want to teach my kids about like evolution, okay, like, and this is a huge anatomy thing. So I could have them like, look at what is the ligament? Is it a ligament?
No, that's
right here.
It's a muscle,
but it's like a certain percentage of people have it and they don't. And it's one of those things that's like tangible, right? It's something that And I know you were going on to something, but I want to introduce this really quick.
Do it.
So with the science curriculum that I use, they have kind of like a structure use, which is, in my opinion, very like the one of the best ways to teach science. So it starts with engaging. So like, how can you engage someone? So like, we're going to cover the concept of evolution. I'm going to show them this ligament or is it a ligament or a muscle?
It's a muscle, and it's called,
muscle.
And for everybody listening, it's called palmaris longus.
Palmaris longus. Yes. So I'll have them like, okay, like pull out your hand. We're going to engage in this. And some of them are like, what? Like, I don't have that. Like you have that, blah, blah, blah. And then, so, okay, now that I brought that up, let's explore. So it's engage, explore, and then you explain. Once you have them hooked in, once you have them bought in,
perception.
Okay, they can see it, right? Perception, the perception's there.
It. Yeah.
Then you explain it. When we were in high school, or when, we've had those classes, I'm sure our audience has as well. It's like, okay, well, we're going to talk about evolution. In 1975, they go into the whole explaining and the lecture, right? And so this kind of reverses and gets you, it's a different philosophy, different thinking. And I personally like it a lot. So you engage, explore. That's when you get the explanation and kind of you do your research. If you're doing a case study, whatever it may be, then you evaluate. Then you check and see, and obviously throughout you can have your little checks for understanding okay, what was the name of that muscle again? Oh, palmaris longus. Oh, okay, you got it. So now we can move on. And then at the very end, then you can say, okay, you recycle it, right? So, okay, that's one example of evolution and how our bodies have changed over time, right? What is another example on the human body that demonstrates or shows that we have evolved? And then we usually go like wisdom
gills.
Teeth,
wisdom
teeth, gills. I mean,
tails.
Tails. There's tons of there's tons of different examples that kids are like, oh, this is cool.
I'm just making that up.
you're learning evolution, but yeah. I mean, yeah, it's that's kind of the approach that I incorporate not only in the classroom but also on the soccer field as well. So
that's perfect. Yeah, and so to segue on that and carry on the second point that I was making is that process you just broke down for us becomes more and more difficult with the physical and cognitive self as it's developing, the physical and cognitive person as they're developing. So children, it becomes more and more difficult as they grow older. And if we could talk about science super quick, and then I'm going to come back to get everybody's perception on board. Our brain has a ton of synapses. Imagine a road map. You look at an old school map of the United States, and there's like tons of farm roads, highways, interstates. It looks like a spider web, right? So imagine that in the brain when a baby's born. Now, that first year of life, all these roads are being erased off the map, right? Or they're like roadblocks where the roads are closed, no longer exist, right? Grass grows over them, doesn't exist. And it happens, more roads than any other time in a person's life is happening that first year of life.
So malleable.
Now, how does the brain decide what roads get roadblocked and what roads remain open and actually get more funding from the government and become superhighways? Well, it's based off the environment that they're exposed to. And so, again, this first year of life is happening a lot, right? Brain's making big decisions called neural pruning, chopping off these neural pathways that are, probably never going to come back again. Now, as you're getting older, let's say you're dealing with the college kids, even like the varsity team, they're already nearing the end of developmental age as well.
Right.
So they're already almost done with roadblocks and road closures in their brain for their neural synapses. Okay. So
their ceiling, right? Where they're at,
Let's say, let's zoom in on the map real quick and let's talk about mobility. Okay. And you have these two roads, and back then, for some reason, they didn't think this activity was cool, or they decided to take a few years of their life and not do anything for mobility. So the road got grass growing all over it. Now it's like, you can't even see the road, right? But if you're like walking around on a hike and you have your poke your stick, you're like, what was that noise? And you peel the grass back. There's an old road that was once there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, okay. It's going to take some work and some time. Just like you said earlier, it's going to be difficult, right? It's going to take some work and some time for you to get some staff, some people to come help clear the grass off the road, repave the road, and make it drivable again. But it is possible. Okay. Now, the other highway, okay, it's still nice, clean, pretty, fully funded. It's super highway, right? It's still much faster to travel on that highway than the dirt bumpy road, right? So what we can do is, like, as coaches, is we have to take advantage of kids during their youth years and place them in environments and activities where they can create as many super highways in the good directions and the good movements physically and cognitive decisions as well. They're critical thinking, so that we don't have to worry about working really hard to unbury that old road that's there and try to rebuild it. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. And so as coaches, that's what I want to segue into is we both understood this concept through the years, and we both took it very seriously.
Yeah.
And we both took a course together to get certified in the very beginning from Milo Bryant. And
shout out. Is he still around? Where's he at? Maybe he's listening to this podcast right now.
Yeah, I hope he is. I'm gonna get him on.
He's not. I just see him nodding his head the whole time.
Yes, they said. I called him out
with his deep voice.
I called him out in the last episode too, so he's probably really happy right now.
Nice,
but
nice.
I'm gonna get him on pretty soon to talk, anyways. But
cool.
Yeah. So he certified us, right, and kind of opened up this world for me to imagine and think, holy crap, this is how these are the steps on how you make sure these super highways are created. And these other highways, you make sure that grass goes over them. You don't want to see those again. So
for sure.
Anyways, based off of that and based off that understanding, has that changed or altered your coaching? Like, do you see some varsity kids or even some JV kids that maybe aren't fully developed, but you see a growth spurt and then you see a change in their performance? Or, what are you seeing with these kids?
So one thing, there was something that you mentioned earlier about when you're talking about neurons and like the pathways and stuff. And it's like, we all have those golden years. And then obviously as we get older, we forget things and our memory is not where it's at. Our brain's not as malleable. That's kind of how it was explained to me when I was doing my undergrad biology stuff and psychology. I took a couple psychology classes and I think that our understanding is like very, if we were to look at it on a graph, it's very like we're here. And then we just slowly, where it can easily be something that, comes down and then goes back up, or it's something that, starts here and just goes continually up, but it takes, like you said, the correct environment, correct reinforcements. I think for me, Milo was a huge like reinforcement, like, hey, like, I think you're kind of onto something, Jeremy. Like, I'm glad I was doing those, what is it called?
These movements. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we're measuring.
Trying to think of like a specific movement with the,
like a Turkish get up.
That's what
chops and lifts, dude. Everybody's probably laughing right now listening to this because
those are. I was doing that in like 2014, and my trainer at Central, he saw me doing those, and he's like, oh, Turkish get ups. I was like, dude, this is what helped me survive in college ball and stuff. And he's like, he's like, you're pretty good at those. I was like, I've done these, for a while.
Times.
Yeah. And we have the whole, actually looked it up recently because I was wanting to make sure I was hitting all the correct points and everything. And during the COVID and all that, they started doing a challenge with the water bottle. If you could like do, and that's cool, man. That's like a whole nother way to like reinforce and to make it cool and to like, expose people to like solid stretches that are all body weight, right? You could do it without.
It's the same thing as telling them CRISPR when you're trying to talk about DNA.
Exactly.
You're just trying to, get on their level, like, oh, let's do this challenge, but really
such like a good hook. But
but specifically what I want to know is I just gave this whole explanation of, this superhighway is created and this one's pruned. When you see kids come to your program and I want to play soccer, you can tell what kids had what things pruned and what things not. What does it look like to you? Because just for the audience, like, during that age, like like I was talking about, like there's still pruning going on, like that big roadmap. Sure. There's still a lot of roads being closed, and you can tell what kids, by the way, parents and coaches, if you're listening, once a road closes, yeah, sure, we can do some stuff to build it back up, but it's permanent. You have to create a new road. You have to create a new highway. It's not salvageable, and it takes a ton of work and
time sensitive.
Very. So, it's important to have the right coach to make sure they're developing correctly, because you can really affect somebody's long-term health. Now, explain to us, like, what does that look like physically from the outside? Because, like, I'm talking about in the brain, but what do these kids, like, do they look awkward when they're running? Like, you tell them to sprint to the line and they're like, don't get it? Or do they improve throughout the season? What do you do?
So I think for me, like, I see it obviously with different ages. The mechanics for soccer are ingrained in my head. So like what I see is something that you guys would probably like, or a normal person who's like, either that's not their sport or they're not really familiar with something that's like similar to the movements of that sport. I think that they would just kind of be like, oh, I didn't really notice that. But it's like, for me, the running mechanics, obviously when you have the ball, when you don't have the ball, right? Just with that alone,
that's a big one.
Just with that alone, you have like you could probably write like a whole, 3 or 4 books or a couple chapters on, what does your running mechanics look like? And then, you give non-examples. Who's the fastest kid on the team? Let's compare his running mechanics to a new player, or some guy who's not as fast, or different size or different age or whatever it may be, and then you can kind of start to see. And so I
have a question for you.
Go ahead.
All right, as a coach, you see a kid on JV and you're trying to pick who you're going to put on varsity next year or this up tryouts. Mm-hmm. Would you rather take, for the last roster spot, the kid who's super fast and not as good on the ball with skill, or would you rather take the kid who's really good on the ball but no speed?
Ooh, that's a tough question, man. That is for me.
Because we have those players.
100%.
There was some on your college team, and I guarantee there's probably some you see right now.
So my diplomatic answer would be, it depends what I have. Yeah, so if I already have like a bunch of speed demons on my team, and like I'm really missing a player that can control the ball, then I would obviously talk it over with my staff and see what they think, and then make that decision. More than likely it would lean towards the player that maybe didn't have the exact speed, but has that, what we call mental, that soccer IQ. They have that down, because that's almost like hard. I mean, we talked about the whole couple minutes ago, the brainwaves, and that's all stuff that's in here that like we want to keep that, like we want to reinforce that. We want to flourish it, water it, keep it growing, those type of things. And it's really hard, extremely hard to find a player that is mentally disciplined in our sport. I mean, I'm sure in other sports too, but that
whole development process we're talking about, everybody's focusing, including me, on the physical aspect of it, of that development, those roadways that we're talking about, but not so much the cognitive side of stuff. Exactly. We all overlook it. It doesn't look sexy or anything, but yet we're like wanting it, right? Like you're talking about how important that is, right? That's like that's how you play the next level of the game.
Yes. Now, on the flip side of all of that, right? Like if I have a group of players that are all like very smart and very disciplined, and they work together, and maybe they're lacking that speed or lacking that explosiveness, I'll have no issues taking that player that's a little bit lower in that area or in that bucket of soccer IQ, and working with them and spending time with them. Right. And that's one of those investments, right? It's an investment. You have to invest in trust that you can make that player not only and put him into the best mix of your team. That's what's great about team sports, right? You're thinking about an entire 11, not just one player. Whereas, with those single player sports, man, I started playing golf, and my gosh, it's like one of the most difficult things I've ever done. I'm just taking like a chemistry class or something, But
try having the soccer team throw a baseball. It's awkward as heck,
man. Right. It's just like, and that's
that roadway they got blocked that we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
And you talked about in the very beginning, your parents were amazing, right? They made sure that you learned movement. It wasn't about the sport. It was about fundamental movement skills, right? It was about gross motor skills that you could throw, you can kick, you can turn, you can jump, you can land, you can, scream and talk while you're running, right? And run backwards. Like, all these things are very important.
And being being supported, reinforced and like reassured, and like, it's okay. I mean, everyone loves to win. And I understand, we're kind of going a little bit in youth sports. We're going, some people are getting really mad because everyone's getting an award and everything like that. And, I have different, opinions on things like that as well. But at the same time, it's like, if you're, look at the quote here, right? If you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything that's going to help you, grow. A huge part of learning, a huge part of growing and developing is, being willing to take those, take a risk and
fail,
try something new and fail
and lose, and developing that, developing that cognitive, like we're talking about. Yeah. I'm sure you've had and seen players that just whine and cry or give up on the field when they're losing. It's like, that is not who you want, even if they're super skilled, right? Like that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And so, the other thing I was going to kind of touch on as well is, I'm helping, I was talking with Jaime earlier, head coach at Fresno Pacific, if we were to go on the topic of leadership, I was thinking of all the coaches that I've had, and talk about a person who just really just, allowed and just gives you that gave me that freedom at like a really cool age where I was able to explore and do things with the Fresno Pacific soccer camps, which it's a youth camp. So it's there's anything between 4-year-olds. Some of them are even 3.5. Some of them that are like Milton's kid was out there and he was like 3.5. Orlando's kids are out there and they're young, and there's all the way up to, I think there is an 8th grader that's out there this year. So that all those camps are running this week within a span of this week. So my whole like nerdy coalition for launching athletic youth side is like, man, this is awesome. Like I get to like experience this, and it's long days and you can see the kids whining and see the things, but I also see like these kids that just have Eric Velarde's kids out there, dude. And he is like 4, maybe 4, but he could go up in an age group or so and still he's just Wow. And he's tiny, he's short, but to me it's like, it's fascinating to see those if you want to call them phenomena, it's like, wow, like how and like why. And I talked to Eric briefly about it. He's like, well, he's been around it, the environment, it's reinforced. He's left-footed, but he can use his right foot. And that's like the age. That's when we want to give them total freedom. We don't need to teach how to curve a ball or how to juggle, those type of things. Like let them explore, let them kind of figure it out, build those roadmaps. So that way they can keep them watered, keep them going. So that way they can keep them and they can kind of add into their toolbox or add into their bucket, whatever analogy you want to use. Right. And then you see some of the kids that are just, what's also really cool about this is my 8th year doing this camp. So I've seen, I think I've officially seen kids that have gone from the youngest group. We call them the flamingos, pink flamingos. So we've seen them, and that's usually the kindergartners. So we usually keep the 5-year-old, 6-year-old range. And then anyone that's younger, we kind of group them all in together. And so I get to see the development. I get to see those kids from that all the way up until the very last group, where usually we don't let high schoolers come in, but there's been a couple like freshmen that have come and stuff. And for me, like you can see, like they come to you at age 5 or 6, and they're like tiny and short, and there's no muscles that are there. They're just kind of, there. And then, 2 or 3 years later, or like they skip a year, and then you kind of go and see them. And now they're like so tall, and like they can run, and like they have a little bit of muscles going on. It's like, man, like it's wild. It's mind boggling.
It's pretty cool to see that, like see what they've been doing since, between this summer and last summer. Right.
Right.
But like Eric Velada's kid, it sounds like, I haven't seen him, but if you're explaining that he's short, but has a lot of skill, just real quick, when we talk about these developmental windows, when we talk about this pruning that happens really quick, right? Happens quick early on, like I talked about, slows down, and then it happens again really quick, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happens is when these kids are growing, right now, he's in an environment where he's enforced, and Eric's doing an awesome job of getting him exposed to this stuff, and he's happy, he's loving it, right? But he's going to hit a growth spurt, and when he hits that growth spurt, he might have some awkwardness with the ball, maybe, or something, right? Or
for sure,
or like you said, awkwardness running alone. Like Milo talks about this, speaking of him, all the time. We need to teach these soccer players how to sprint, right? And
dude, I remember doing like little drills and little things like, okay, sit on your butt, sit up straight, and just show me your running mechanics. And I was just like, I remember like hunched over. I mean, I still have bad, awful posture, but he was like, think about where you are. And I think he brought out like a mirror, like took a picture. He's like, look at your posture. And I'm like, all right. So I fixed it. And then I started running. He's like, okay, and I'm going to show you where your hands are going, like that, like real time adjustments with explanations and like justifications is like, it's almost, that's all the buy-in you need. Right. And then you do those things where I do that with my high schoolers all the time. I'm like, let's look at your running mechanics, because we have like a dead week where you can't touch a soccer ball, and it's mostly for like fitness and stuff. And that's where I incorporate skipping, the bear crawls, all of those like funky movements that these kids cannot do to save their life, and they get mad at me when I have them do it. And then when I demonstrate it for them, they're like, oh, like you can kind of do that for like an overweight 30-year-old kind of, that's impressive, And so, it's huge, man.
There's going to be a point where like he grows, he's a little lanky and awkward, but his bones grew, but his tissues are pretty tight. They're still getting used to the new length that just happened, which by the way, the arms and legs aren't growing the same length the whole time. It's like one and then one. And so it's going to be awkward. And these are the times when you have to do what you're talking about. You have to teach these mechanics. You want to teach the more details into that area, rather than, like you said, kicking a soccer ball, trying to curve it and stuff like that, right?
We're trying to do, the skill moves and things like that. Like there's a time and a place for those things. But I mean, at that age, like, and Jaime's the one that is for me, like the reinforcer, the one that kind of explained that to me. And he's like, let them explore, let them figure out, let them, try things and, be a part of a team and, pass the ball, lose the ball, all of that is, and so they play outdoor for the first part of the day. And there's just tons of drills and things that we incorporate, and we just let them explore. And then
that's perfect.
They go into the gym and they play futsal. So it's like, perfect. It's like everything that they just had that they got somewhat used to is like removed from them. Right. So like the biggest thing that affects their play is the surface. So obviously with the friction of the grass, the ball's going to slow down a lot more, and they have more control or more time to control. Take that away and put it on a flat court surface. It's like they're in a brand new thing. And those kids, the first day, I wish I could like show like a quick video of like the first day to like the last day, and like how quick those kids are able to like, man, just like pick it up. And they just, their ceiling. I mean, if we talk about analogies, their ceiling is just so much higher than, some of the older kids. And from a biological standpoint, their brains are just malleable. They're taking all this information in. They're taking, that. So my job in this camp is to work with not only the kids that are at the camp, but also to work with the coaches and say, hey, like you should be working with these kids and stopping them, and coaching them and reinforcing and really giving them that positive feedback, so that way they remember and they know. So the next time, because at that age too, those kids just want to impress you, right? And they want the attention. Some of these kids, some of these parents, they use these camps as just kind of a daycare, which is fine. That's all good. We love it. Mm-hmm. And so they want that attention. And when you give them feedback, when you tell them that you like what they see, their eyes light up, and it's like, I'm sure that's like also reinforcing those maps in their head. Right. So that's the cool part. I get to work with, all the ages and the coaches as well, and give them, little tools that I've kind of picked up along the way as well. So,
well, I like what you guys are doing, because you hit on the head. It's like when they are lanky like that, we're trying to teach them, more coordination rather than speed and power. You don't want to make it so like, you need to do this and that, like so blocked, right? You just want to create, you want to use cues like, okay, instead of saying like, you need to lift your arm up this high, you can say, all right, every time you lift up, you're going to touch this thing, right? Or, you just try to create an environment where they can be successful, and it's not always organized, right? Sometimes just play, like you talked about, which is awesome.
Exactly.
And most camps are just like, oh yeah, just let the kids do whatever, right? And like, I love that. I'm happy that you guys have more concern over what they do.
And like, I don't know, I think that parents, going from like the other end of it too, is like parents have to, there's got to be a little bit of education and a little bit of trust behind what we're doing as well. Right. It's easy for parents, and especially in our culture, the American culture, like to just see something like that and to see the unstructure and the craziness and chaoticness of a camp, and be like, oh, like I paid this amount of money and I want my kid, playing soccer. They're at a soccer camp, but they're playing sharks and minnows and doing things that like don't incorporate the ball. And, it's like, hey, like, yes, there's a time and a place. I thought this was
a soccer camp.
Exactly. Like so as a supervisor as well, I've had those conversations with some parents, and, if we're in the gym and the kids are doing games and stuff, some of the parents, some of them are really nice about it. Some of them are just kind of blatant about it. And they're like, well, why are they doing this? And so the education portion for parents is important as well. Like, especially if, and that's something that parents should honestly be looking out for and asking and be involved with, like, why, ask those questions. Why are you having my kid do this? And, sometimes it's just, sometimes there's a coach that's in a situation that doesn't know how to explain it, or they just don't have, the knowledge or the confidence to explain it. But, it's that those type of things that, like, I think there needs to be a little bit more of a explanation behind, and kind of not, and for us, like we could talk and use, different levels of vocabulary, but like, even if it's just like a pamphlet or something that's like a very like simplified, like not a QR code, but like an infographic that has visuals. That's like, this is why we're doing this. This is why we're doing this. Like, I think that would eliminate, and we would have a lot more like willingness in, the things that we enjoy and the things that we like with, exploring. And
I think you brought up an amazing point. We're making this sound very complex, right? Like, oh, they need to hit the developmental milestone at the right time. And if it's speed or agility and this and that, and, oh my God, the parents are like sweating, right? Like, oh my God, there's only one chance to do this. Like, what do I do? What do I do? And, it's actually like, if you signed your kid up with lessons with me, it would look like we're just climbing trees, having fun, rolling around. Dude, like,
do you remember the stuff that we did with Milo? It was like, man, this is fun stuff. There's
obstacle
like
course,
pool noodles and like inverted pull-ups, and it was like, all right, I'm going to do a plank, and I want you to push me over. We're like, all right, let's
knock me over.
Yeah, those crazy type of things, which kids love that. Kids love that, and they eat that up.
That is
it's
the development. Yeah, you have, and Goes back to what we just first talked about, perception, right?
Yeah.
You're going to talk about DNA to your high school students. You're going to bring up something cool that like, oh, now I want to learn about DNA. That's what that is. With your kids, same thing. You want them to learn, some strength and some capacity and balance. Okay, fine. Put them on a line and say the floor's lava, right? Like, you get down to their level.
They just played that today, floor's lava. And, I mean, there's just so many just fun activities that kids have an opportunity. And, that's actually what I tell the coaches is like, hey, like if you see that, and I mean, by the way, we're in 102 to 103 degree weather. So it's like, kudos for the kids being out there and kudos for the coaches. And it's like, okay, but like, let's make it like, what's the happy percentage? Like what percentage and at what age should they be playing more games and like running games and like soccer, right? So you would say like from a coach or like from like Jaime's perspective, like, okay, the older kids, most of their camp can be soccer. You can incorporate some of the, like, instead of doing a traditional dynamic warm up, you play freeze tag or cartoon tag or, something that's fun, Now for the younger kids, attention span, you go into like, their technical abilities are not as advanced and things like that. And so you have to kind of, there's definitely a craft and like a scaffold behind it in order to have the most buy-in and the most success. Right. So it's like trying to find that whole like perfect recipe is, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I've been doing this camp for about 8 years and it's like, each year I get to like make my little tweaks and make my little suggestions. And,
that's cool.
We talk about all the successes, but there's tons of things where it's like, yeah, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Like that was a total fail, but at least we tried it, scrap it up and say, is there something that we can keep from this, or should we just totally can it, as is? So I think that's what makes, the best recipe and the best fosters like the best environment for learning and for like, even, I mean, this camp is for all types of kids. It's not just, it's under the umbrella of a soccer camp, but there's baseball players, boys, girls, tennis players. I mean, there's faculties, kids that are there they don't even really do sports. They're in band and stuff, and they're, that's their opportunity to get out and to be physical. And, if Milo was here, he would be like crying because, these kids are out there being active, and that's like his whole deal. Like, let's get more kids out there and let's get them playing, and if you don't agree with that, I mean, I don't know why you're listening to this podcast.
Exactly. So I think we have one last message I have one last message for parents and coaches, and we've kind of already talked about it, and then you can just piggyback on it or whatever you want to say. But I want to talk back about, this seems to be the most frequently asked question or concern that parents have, especially those parents that you talked about go to you and they're like, hey, they're not learning soccer stuff, right? They're very concerned about getting their kid ready to get that scholarship in college. They're very concerned about, what can I do to maximize my kid's potential to become a professional athlete
or chances, it's like, what is the best opportunity that my kid, I get those questions all the time from coaches and from parents and from, the college players that want not the opposite, but the even more, right? The college players that are playing college ball because they want to play professionally, right? It is such a common question.
Yeah. So there's like small percentage that play college, even smaller that even go pro. So first off, right off the bat, genetics is going to play a big role, right?
Huge.
And your body type and all that. And just, that's a huge one. Okay. And the percentage is going to be very low. But beyond all of that, if we put all of that aside, okay, what I'm looking for, if I'm a professional scout, you're right? I think the first thing that goes in the coach's mind or a scout's mind is, do we need speed? Do we need skill? What do we need for our team? Right. But after that, there's certain players that you're willing to, even though you don't need that, you're willing to get on your team because they're once in a lifetime. Right.
You're willing to invest in them. You can see the investment value in them, or like, your capabilities, like, that's something you can work with. Right.
Right. And this person, if you're wanting your kid to be that, okay, I would rather any day, this is similar to the question I asked you, if I was at a higher level. I would rather keep my eye and attention on this high schooler that is super fast, super strong, just speed kills. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just a wild bull out there, right? They're just crazy, right? Throwing their body everywhere. They're faster than everybody. They have no control. They have
Mm-hmm.
some skill, but not very much, right? I would pick that kid. And the reason why is because if we're talking about development and these roads that are closing and stuff, well, there's certain roads that close faster when this pruning happens, right? And let's say one highway is called speed, another highway is called power, another one's strength, another one's coordination. So these roads close at certain ages and times. Well, the road of skill, right? The road of skill acquisition is one of the last roads to close the door on. So what you want to do is you want to fill your tank. You want to maximize speed, power, like all these foundational things that a body needs, that an athlete needs. Then you can worry about skill later. So that is why any day I'll take that wild colt, untamed horse, right? It's just out there going crazy, that beast. And then I'm not going to have a problem teaching them skill, right? If I'll take an athlete any day, this person can play any sport, they can do backflip, they're going to figure out the skill, right? That'll come easy to them. So parents, if you're listening and you want your kid to be successful later in life and to be healthy, you want to make sure that you're not questioning Coach Eli about why we're learning soccer, right? You want to make sure that they're failing. The reason why they're not learning soccer the whole time is because Coach Eli and us, we're trying to get them to learn speed and trying to maximize all of these windows and these roads while we have the chance to do this, right? And an easy way, perception, to get to the parents on your level is think about language, right? It's very hard, very possible, very hard to learn a new language at your adult age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our developmental window for learning language has passed, but we can create a new pathway to do that. It just takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of work.
We still teach foreign language in high school, man. It's like, and that's that's a whole nother conversation that I've had with some of my coworkers. But no, it's like,
so that's my last message for this podcast for parents, coaches, all that, right? Please, like, you're saving a person's health. You're saving a person by being that type of coach. So if you're a parent looking for a coach, make sure they understand that. Make sure, that you ask these types of questions to your coach and make sure that you have them in the right program that they need to be in to be able to live a long, healthy, successful life.
For sure. Yeah, I think, I mean, it's something that we didn't talk about directly, but it's been like indirectly infused, right? The importance of parents being involved, right? And I'm very grateful that my parents, shout out if they ever listen to this or watch this, but I'm very thankful.
They've already turned it off by now.
Yeah. Or they fast forward. Hey, Mom, I shouted you out at the very end. No, I think that it's huge that, because there were coaches that I had that weren't the greatest, or obviously didn't agree with what my dad thought I should have been doing, or my mom, or, but at the end of the day, they understood the importance of letting me explore and letting me figure it out and seeing what's working and what's not working. Right. I think, something that's kind of like a footnote or something that we also need to add is that, some coaches don't know how to explain these things. Right. Mm-hmm. I couldn't properly explain why I'm doing, having my kids do these strange movements. I don't know all of the muscular structure and stuff, but I know that it's, at the end of the day, it's cool and it gets them moving. Like, it gets them exploring. It gets them using different muscles that they don't use. And if I can make them the person next to the next person, or the quietest kid on my soccer team, if I can, give him his moment to do a headstand or a handstand and walk for 4 minutes or a couple minutes or whatever it is, awesome. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, those are the things, those are, what are cool about, not only having a team sport, but, giving kids an opportunity and giving them, exposing them to different things, that are important, and long-term, right? It's an investment. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to invest in kids that are going to be, they're going to have success both through college and out of college, right? It's like, you're here for a short amount of time, make the best of it. So, that's my last little spiel.
I hear you. Well, thank you everybody for listening in on this podcast. It was great catching up, Eli. It was great talking.
Let's do it again, man.
I know we can for sure talk for hours more, but let's give our audience a little break. All right.
Yeah.
All right, guys. See you next time. Thank you.